11th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion. So, Om Agana Timadanda Shah Gadanjana Shilakaya Chakshurum Militam Yeda Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipno Sadharma Samstapako Lokantam Hitakarnao Tribhuvane Manyo Shadhanya Karo Radha Krishna Padaravinda Vajananantena Makta Liko Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghuyugo Sri Jiva Gopalako. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert at scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the 3 worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. So, chapter 7 is called Evidence Regarding Devotional Principles. So, the first point is accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. In the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd chapter, verse 21, Prabhupada tells Maharaj Nimi, "My dear king, please know for certain that in the material world there is no happiness. It is simply a mistake to think that there is happiness here, because this place is full of nothing but miserable conditions. Any person who is seriously desirous of achieving real happiness must seek out a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of a spiritual master is that he must have realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and arguments, and thus be able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, are to be understood as bona fide spiritual masters. Everyone should try to find such a bona fide spiritual master in order to fulfill his mission of life, which is to transfer himself to the plane of spiritual bliss. The purport is that one should not accept as a spiritual master someone who is fool number 1, who has no direction according to the scriptural injunctions, whose character is doubtful, who does not follow the principles of devotional service, or who has not conquered the influence of the 6 sense gratifying agents. The 6 agents of sense gratification are the tongue, the genitals, the belly, anger, mind, and words." That's from the Nectar of Instruction. Anyone who has practiced controlling these 6 is permitted to make disciples all over the world. To accept such a spiritual master is the crucial point for advancement in spiritual life. One who is fortunate enough to come under the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master is sure to traverse the path of spiritual salvation without any doubt. In addition, there's 3 qualities mentioned. Tadviganartam sa gurumeva vigachet samitpani shrokshinam brahmanishtam. This is a very important verse. Tadviganartam, that means one, if one wants spiritual knowledge, then a vigachet, it's essential, imperative that one accepts a spiritual master. And then how do you know who's a bona fide spiritual master, and how do you serve him? 3 categories of knowing and 3 categories of serving, which are the same categories. Samitpani Shrotrium Brahmanishtam. Samitpani means basically bringing firewood or water for the spiritual master. That's the literal meaning, but it means being a humble servant of the spiritual master, not only while the spiritual master is on the planet, but when the spiritual master disappears. Actually, Srila Prabhupada comments in the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam about the story of Puranjana, that when the spiritual master leaves the planet, one should be ready to leave the planet with the spiritual master unless one is able to carry out the mission of the spiritual master. Just like Prabhupada gives the example, and the Bhagavatam gives the example, of a chaste wife who, when the husband dies, jumps in the fire. Of course, we're not recommending that for any of you here. Your husband passed away, don't jump in the fire. But, you have the example of Madri, who was married to Pandu. She jumped in the fire. But Kunti remained to take care of the kids. So I guess as long as there's kids, don't jump in the fire. If there's no kids, no, I'm not recommending that. But Prabhupada said that should be the mood of the bona fide disciple too, that otherwise there's no purpose in life unless one can serve the mission of the spiritual master. The mission. Not simply that one becomes Krishna conscious, but one serves the mission of the spiritual master. There's actually a difference between becoming... if you serve the mission, you become Krishna conscious. And if you try to become Krishna conscious without serving the mission, you don't become Krishna conscious. So, that's the real point. So, anyway, so Samit Pani means to be a servant, a humble servant. Shrotriyam, one must have heard from the spiritual master, be able to repeat in his own words, not like a parrot. And Brahmanishtam, Nishta, steady in service, 24/7. That means 24/7, 365 days a year, and 366 on leap year. You don't have leap year here?
Next year.
Next year's leap year. And if you're born on that particular day, you only get a birthday every 4 years. You're most unfortunate. Most unfortunate, isn't it? But also you aged less. So there's a benefits there. Anyway, so those are the qualities of a bona fide spiritual master. Also, those qualities are there of a bona fide disciple. So you see, they're actually the same qualities. Samitpani, Shropshim, Brahmanisham. That's important to remember that. Okay, next one. Accepting initiation from the spiritual master and receiving instructions from him. Sage Prabhuda continued to speak to the king as follows: My dear king, a disciple has to accept the spiritual master not only as spiritual master, but also as a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Super Soul, which is the same thing. In other words, the disciple should accept the spiritual master as God because he is the external manifestation of Krishna. This is confirmed in every scripture, and a disciple should accept the spiritual master as such. One should learn Srimad Bhagavatam seriously, with all respect and veneration for the spiritual master. Hearing and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam is the religious process which elevates one to the platform of serving and loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, I think we have to really unpack this a little bit, because when it says you accept the spiritual master as God, or as the external manifestation of Krishna, the Super Soul, it doesn't mean you think that he has material perfection. Devotees get confused sometimes. Like if Prabhupada, for example, were to give the wrong directions while you were driving the car, would that mean that he's not bona fide? No. And actually there was one guru outside of ISKCON who said that Prabhupada was a pure devotee, and even when there were some management issues, or I don't want to say mistakes, but management things that didn't quite work out, it was Krishna's arrangement. So the point is, you should think that the spiritual master should not think that the spiritual master is omniscient or omnipotent. He's not. He's generally a jiva soul. Sometimes you'll get Krishna as your guru if you happen to live in Vrindavan. The Brajavasis have Krishna directly as their guru. But generally we should understand that, and this is also called hermeneutics, how to understand what the spiritual master says when he's speaking from the absolute platform and when he's just saying something that in regard to his personal opinion, because actually there are personal opinions of persons. Like if I gave you the example the other day that Prabhupada says that potatoes are the king of all vegetables. If I disagree with it, doesn't mean I'm not disagreeing, but I don't follow it. I don't eat potatoes. Does that make me a demon, a non-disciple of my spiritual master because I don't eat potatoes? No. Because I don't eat sweets, and I don't eat fried food. No, doesn't mean that. It just means that we're persons, and the spiritual master is a person. Otherwise, you would be guilty of nirvishesha. That means not understanding the difference between the categories. That's what nirvishesha means, the differences or categories. And nirvishesha means no difference between the categories. Just like we say nirvishesha shunyavadi paschatya teja tarni. So you'd be thinking that the spiritual master is God, or you may be thinking that the spiritual master is just like a puppet. That God is just moving all of his limbs and speaking through his mouth. In other words, you never get to know the spiritual master because he's just like the radio. You understand? The radio or whatever is, because the voice comes from the radio. And it's not that you're really getting to understand the radio, you're getting to understand the person who's speaking. So if you take the spiritual master like that he's just, just like a radio that Krishna's speaking through, that's bogus. Because then you never get to understand him as a person. He is a person, P-E-R-S-O-N. He's not simply a radio, a machine that transmits, something from the spiritual world, but he's putting his own slant on it according to the philosophy and Siddhanta. He stays faithful to that. So we try to understand that, so it's not, if you expect material perfection, you ain't going to get it from any spiritual master. It just doesn't work. So, next one is serving. All right, no, we have that. The attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bone. It will be easy for him to understand the spiritual knowledge. This is confirmed in the Vedas, and Rupa Goswami will further explain that for a person who has unflinching faith in God and the spiritual master, everything becomes revealed very easily. That's from the Bhagavatam. So, serving the spiritual master with faith and confidence. Regarding accepting initiation from the spiritual master in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 17th chapter, verse 27, it is stated by Lord Krishna, "My dear Uddhava, the spiritual master must be accepted not only as my representative, but as my very self." Now I explain the difference, Chincha Veda Veda Tattva. He must never be considered on the same level with an ordinary human being. One should never be envious of the spiritual master as one may be envious of an ordinary man. That doesn't mean he's giving one permission to be envious of an ordinary man. The spiritual master should always be seen as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by serving the spiritual master, one is able to serve all the demigods. So, anyway, by serving Krishna, one's serving all the demigods too. Interesting thing about the demigods, it has nothing to do with this verse. There's nowhere in the Vedic literatures that says, and this may be a shock to you, that the deities of the demigods are none different than the demigods. So there's nowhere in the Vedic literatures that, in the bona fide Vedic literatures, that recommends that you worship deities of demigods. The only thing is that Krishna is non-different than his deity. Krishna is non-different from his name. But it doesn't say the names of the demigods are non-different from the demigods. In fact, the names of the demigods indicate the position of the demigods. Like Indra is a position. Vayu is a position. You can become Indra, or Vayu, or any of the other demigods, except for Lord Shiva. So, anyway, so it's interesting because I was dealing with this this Muslim guy who tries to convince Hindus, you may be aware of, to leave Hinduism and join the Muslim information, the Muslim church or Muslim organization. And one of the arguments he makes, which is a bona fide argument, that it actually says in the Vedic literature that you should only worship one God, and Krishna says in the Gita that those who worship the demigods, they're materialistic and less intelligent. Mm-hmm. And he's quoting the verses that I agree in. But so he's attacking actually Hinduism, which is, I don't even know what Hinduism is. But anyway, he's attacking the worship of different gods, which we also agree with. And this way trying to dissuade people from being Hindus. But we are presenting the actual conclusion of the Vedic literatures. So, anyway, for those of you who are worshiping demigods, please accept my humble apologies. But there's no injunction that deities of demigods are the demigods. There's no injunction. Of course, this pure devotee is just the picture. He's present there. Present simultaneously, one and different. You know, it's not that if you tear up a picture of a guru that he feels all torn up inside. You know, Krishna allows the presence or the mercy of the spiritual master to be manifest through the picture. But there's no injunction that deities of demigods, the demigods are there.
In the case of Hanuman, when he was reciting...
Hanuman's not a demigod, he's a pure devotee. He's a pure devotee. It's a little different. A lot different, not a little different. You know, pure devotee, that's a different thing. That's why we can have a deity of Hanuman, but don't have a deity of Indra. I haven't seen many devotees with a deity of Indra. So, you know, there's so many concoctions, like in Bengal, they make these big deities of Bhadrakali. So many concoctions. Anyway, in the Skanda Purana, it is advised that a devotee follow the past acharyas and saintly persons, because by following such, one can achieve the desired results with no chance of lamenting or being baffled in his progress. The scripture, known as the Brahma Yamala, states as follows: if someone wants to pose himself as a great devotee without following the authorities of revealed scriptures, then his activities will never help him make progress in devotional service. Instead, he will simply create disturbances for sincere students of devotional service. Those who do not strictly follow the principles of revealed scriptures are generally called sahajas, those who imagine everything to be cheap, who have their own concocted ideas, and who do not follow the scriptural injunctions. Such persons are simply creating disturbances in the discharge of devotional service. In this connection, an objection may be raised by those who are not in devotional service and who do not care for the revealed scriptures. An example of this is seen in Buddhist philosophy. Lord Buddha appeared in the family of a high-grade Kshatriya king, but his philosophy was not in accord with the Vedic conclusions, and therefore was rejected. Under the patronage of a Hindu king, Maharaj Ashoka, the Buddhist religion was spread all over India and the adjoining countries. However, after the appearance of the great stalwart teacher Shankaracharya, this Buddhism was driven out beyond the borders of India. That's why you don't see too many Buddhists in India. Around Gaya, you'll actually see quite a few Buddhists. But other than that, they are coming from other places, especially in Bihar, because that's where Buddha came from, to visit the various places of Buddha's pastimes. And Buddha is an incarnation of Krishna, and the reason he appeared was because people were misusing the Vedic literatures to conduct animal slaughter, to cheat others in the name of the Brahminical culture, and Buddhism was basically a rebellion against that, and so was Jainism. They were both rebelling. Both of these religions were rebelling against this Brahminical exploitation of people and animals. And so it was necessary, so Buddha decried the Vedic literatures. In other words, said, don't follow the Vedic literatures. And Shankaracharya came back and he said, follow the Vedic literatures and I'll teach you the same thing as Buddha. It's called covered Buddhism, which is a little bit different. And then Chaitanya appeared and brought people back. And actually Ramanujacharya and other acharyas appeared before Lord Chaitanya, and they brought people back full circle to the Vedic literatures with a proper understanding, especially Sripad Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya and the other acharyas, Nimbarka and others. The Buddhists and other religionists who do not care for revealed scriptures sometimes say that there are many devotees of Lord Buddha who show devotional service to Lord Buddha and who therefore should be considered devotees. But in answer to this argument, Rupa Goswami says that the followers of Buddha cannot be accepted as devotees. Although Lord Buddha is accepted as an incarnation of Krishna, the followers of such incarnations are not very advanced in their knowledge of the Vedas. To study the Vedas means to come to the conclusion of the supremacy of the personality of Godhead. Therefore, any religious principle which denies the supremacy of the personality of Godhead is not accepted and is called atheism. Atheism means defying the authority of the Vedas and decrying the great acharyas who teach Vedic scriptures for the benefit of the people in general. Now, they also get benefit by worshiping Buddha. Although they're not devotees per se, still it's a trick. They worship Buddha and they make some advancement as a result. Vigyata Sukriti. Which means unknowing devotional service or unknowing pious activities. Lord Buddha is accepted as an incarnation of Krishna in the Srimad Bhagavatam, but in the same Srimad Bhagavatam it is said that Lord Buddha appeared in order to bewilder the atheistic class of men. Therefore, his philosophy is meant for bewildering the atheists and should not be accepted. If someone asks, why should Krishna propagate atheistic principles, the answer is that it was the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to end the violence which was then being committed in the name of the Vedas. That means animal slaughter. Jesus Christ did the same thing. When he appeared, he came up to the temple in Jerusalem, and they were selling lambs right in the temple for slaughter. You know, right outside the temple, there were lambs. You know what a lamb is?
Yeah.
That's what you count when you want to go to sleep at night. Counting lambs, sheep or lambs or something. Anyway, so what is it? Song Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Little
Mary Had a Little Lamb. Anyway, so they were selling these cute little lambs. Yeah, they're really cute little creatures, and the Jews were offering them, or so-called priests were offering them in sacrifice. You know, just chopping their head off. It's like the, Kali stuff. And pretty hellish stuff. And so Jesus Christ, what he did is he just overturned all the tables outside of the temple. That's why they hated him. They didn't hate him because, he was preaching God consciousness. They hated him because he was interfering with their business. Just trace the money trail. So these two types of priests were called Pharisees and Sadducees. And he was actually, they couldn't make money anymore, selling lambs or changing money like that. And he overturned all their tables. Anyway, so that's what Buddha did too. The so-called religionists were falsely using the Vedas to justify such violent acts as meat eating. And Lord Buddha came to lead the fallen people away from such a false interpretation of the Vedas. And also, for the atheists, Lord Buddha preached atheism so that they would follow him and thus be tricked into devotional service to Lord Buddha or Krishna, which is what I said before. Inquiring about eternal religious principles. In the Naradiya Purana, it is said, if one is actually very serious about devotional service, then all his purposes will be served without delay. Being prepared to give up everything material for Krishna's satisfaction. In the Padma Purana, it is stated, for one who has given up his material sense enjoyment and has accepted the principles of devotional service, the opulence of Vaikuntha, the kingdom of God, is awaiting, residing in a sacred place. In the Skanda Purana, it is also said that for a person who has lived in Dwarka for 6 months, for 1 month, or even for 1 fortnight, there is awaiting elevation to Vaikuntha Lokas. And all the prophets of Sarupya Mukti, the privilege of having the same four-handed bodily features as Narayan. In the Brahma Purana it is said, the transcendental significance of Purushottama Kshetra, which is the 80 square mile field of Lord Jagannath, cannot be properly described. Even the demigods from the higher planetary systems see the inhabitants of this Jagannath Puri as having exactly the same bodily features possessed by one in Vaikuntha. That is, the demigods see the inhabitants of Jagannath Puri as being four-handed. When there was a meeting of the great sages at Naimisharanya, Sutta Goswami was reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, and the importance of the Ganges was stated as follows. The waters of the Ganges are always carrying the flavor of tulasi offered at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, and as such the waters of the Ganges are ever flowing, spreading the glories of Lord Krishna. Wherever the waters of the Ganges are flowing, all will be sanctified both externally and internally, then accepting only what is necessary. In the Naradiya Purana is directed, one should not accept more than necessary if he is serious about discharging devotional service. The purport is that one should not neglect following the principles of devotional service, nor should one accept the rulings of devotional service which are more than what he can easily perform. That's over-endeavor. For example, it may be said that one should chant the Hare Krishna mantra at least 100,000 times daily on his beads. That's 64 rounds, approximately, not exactly. But if this is not possible, then one should minimize his chanting according to his own capacity. Generally, we recommend our disciples to chant at least 16 rounds in their japa beads daily, and this should be completed. But if one is not even able to chant 16 rounds, then he must make it up the next day. He must be sure to keep his vow. If he does not strictly follow this out, follow this vow, then he is sure to be negligent. That is offensive in the service of the Lord. If we encourage offenses, we shall not be able to make progress in devotional service. It is better if one fixes up a regulated principle according to one's own ability and then follows that vow without fail. This will make him advance in spiritual life. In other words, whatever is practical, if one's not able to chant 16 rounds, then better not to take initiation, or wait till initiation, and chant 1 or 2 rounds, which is good. I mean, it's great to chant 1 or 2 rounds, or any rounds. So, observing fasting on Ekadashi. In the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, it is said that one who observes fasting on Ekadashi day is freed from all kinds of reactions to sinful activities and advances in spiritual life and pious life. The basic principle is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for Govinda or Krishna. The real reason for observing fasting on Ekadashi is to minimize the demands of the body and to engage our time in the service of the Lord by chanting or performing similar service. The best thing to do on fasting days is to remember the pastimes of Govinda and to hear his holy name constantly. So devotees should try to chant more rounds on Ekadashi. You know, if I'm not fully engaged, I will chant 64 rounds on Ekadashi. And fast from looking at the news. But as far as fasting from food, you have to do what's practical to maximize your devotional service in hearing and chanting. If you're fasting completely from food, which some devotees do, and your mind can't concentrate on reading, what is the use of that? You understand? Because the whole point is maximize hearing and chanting. So maximization of hearing and chanting requires that you eat Gurunga potatoes. Go ahead and do it. You understand? Because I personally experience if I don't eat at all, I just can't concentrate. I just look at a page, and the words, just like are blurry to me. I mean, some of us have that issue, and other people don't. Some people can fast completely, and, wow, they can read all day long and be ecstatic. But, I don't have much reserve. Some people have a lot of reserve, like the camels. But in the opposite direction. So, and so fasting for them is recommended, but not for me. I mean, of course, we don't eat grains or beans on that day, and we try to minimize things, but what's the use of fasting? We had one person who would fast and stay awake all night on the Ekadasi, and he would simply engage in, let's say, buying and selling things on the stock market. That's how he stayed awake all night. Because otherwise, I mean, he wasn't too interested in Krishna Katha, and he would fall asleep if he tried to read. But if he did activities in the mode of passion, then he thought, wow, making advancement, buying and selling, so much stocks. And so that's not the point. The whole point is to increase your hearing. So the next one is offering respect to the banyan trees. The Skanda Purana is directed that the devotee should offer water to the tulsi plant and the amalaka trees. He should offer respect to the cows and to the brahmanas, and should serve the Vaishnavas by offering them respectful obeisances and meditating upon them. All of these processes will help the devotee to diminish the reactions to his past sinful activities. Next one is giving up the company of non-devotees. Lord Chaitanya was once asked by one of his household devotees what the general behavior of a Vaishnava should be. In this connection, Lord Chaitanya replied that a Vaishnava should always give up the company of non-devotees. Then he explained that there are two kinds of non-devotees. One class is against the supremacy of Krishna, and another class is too materialistic. In other words, those who are after material enjoyment and those who are against the supremacy of the Lord are called Vaishnava, and their company should be strictly avoided. And as I said yesterday, in ordinary dealings, obviously we have to deal with everybody, but insofar as close relationships, revealing the mind, and living with people, you should live with Vaishnavas. It's just like if someone is, we were talking about this yesterday, if someone is getting married and they think they can marry someone who's not a Vaishnava, the mode of nature of that particular person will affect you ultimately. And here now we're going to read about a very heavy injunction from the Katyayana Samhita. It is stated that even if one is forced to live within a cage of iron or in the midst of blazing fire, he should accept this position rather than live with non-devotees who are through and through against the supremacy of the Lord. Wow. That's heavy. Better live in the midst of a blazing fire and a cage of iron and better go to prison, in other words. Similarly, in the Vishnu Rahasya, there's a statement to the effect that one should prefer to embrace a snake, a tiger, or an alligator. That's the same as that's a baby crocodile. Not a baby, but a small version of a crocodile. Rather than associate with persons who are worshippers of various demigods and or impelled by material desire. We should post that in Fiji. It's true. It's true. I mean, it's just bad association. The modes of nature will affect you. And just like we said yesterday, when a devotee gets married, they should marry a devotee. It's different species. You don't have a cat marry a dog. Isn't that was stupid. Or even worse, have a human being marry a dog. Anyways, we love everybody, but we don't live with them. It's not that we hate someone. If someone is not Krishna conscious, we don't. I don't like the word karmi because it's a very derogatory. But it's a non-devotee means they're not performing devotional service. And so, I like everybody, but I'm just not going to hang out with them. Because, Prabhupada said, whoever you associate with, you'll become like that person. In the scriptures, it is instructed that one may worship a certain demigod if he is desirous of achieving some material gain. For example, one is advised to worship the sun god if he is desirous of getting rid of a diseased condition. For a beautiful wife, one may worship Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva. And for advanced education, one may worship Saraswati. Similarly, there is a list in the Srimad Bhagavatam for worshippers of all demigods according to different material desires. But all these worshippers, although they appear to be very good devotees of the demigods, are still considered to be non-devotees. They cannot be accepted as devotees. In fact, if you want any of those things, you worship Krishna. You know, if you want a beautiful wife, you worship Krishna for that. And you see, of course, when you go to India, that many of the trees near holy places are wrapped with different things, generally because ladies want a son. They wrap, you know, you ever seen that? They wrap the trees. Even around Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance place, the neem tree is actually wrapped with different things. But that's all right. You know, if you want something, go to Krishna. If you're really desirous of anything, you know, akama, sarvakama, moksha kama, udadati, go to Krishna. Don't go to the demigods. The Mayavadis and Personalists say that one may worship any form of the Lord and it doesn't matter because one reaches the same destination anyway. Just like if you go to a Hindu temple, I don't know if you have Hindu temples here, but some Hindu temples in the United States, they have like 20 different altars and 20 different deities. And the Brahmin, or so-called Brahmin, will say to you, these are the gods. You know, the gods. Here it doesn't say Krishna is the God, but these are the gods, plural. But it's clearly stated in the Bhagavad Gita that those who worship the demigods will ultimately reach only the planets of the demigods, and those who are devotees of the Lord himself will be promoted to the Lord's abode in the kingdom of God. So actually these persons who are worshippers of demigods have been condemned in the Gita. It is described that due to their lusty desires they have lost their intelligence and have therefore taken to worship the different demigods. So in the Vishnu Rahasya, these demigod worshippers are forcefully condemned by the statement that it is better to live with the most dangerous animals than to associate with these persons. Really heavy. Okay, go ahead. Not accepting unfit disciples, constructing many temples, or reading many books. Another stricture is that a person may have many disciples, but he should not act in such a way that he will be obliged to any of them for some particular action or some favor. And one should also not be very enthusiastic about constructing new temples, nor should one be enthusiastic about reading various types of books, save and except the ones which lead to advancement of devotional service. Practically, if one very carefully reads Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and this Nectar of Devotion, that will give him sufficient knowledge to understand the science of Krishna consciousness. One need not take the trouble of reading other books. In the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 13th chapter, verse 8, Narada Muni, while discussing with Maharaj Yudhishthira the various functions of the different orders in society, especially mentions rules for the sannyasis, those persons who have renounced this material world. One who has accepted the sannyasa order of life is forbidden to accept as a disciple anyone who is not fit. A sannyasi should first of all examine whether a prospective student is sincerely seeking Krishna consciousness. If he is not, he should not be accepted. However, Lord Chaitanya's causeless mercy is such that he advised all of bona fide spiritual masters to speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere. Therefore, in the line of Lord Chaitanya, even the sannyasis can speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere, and if someone is seriously inclined to become a disciple, the sannyasi always accepts him. The one point is that without increasing the number of disciples, there is no propagation of the cult of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, sometimes, even at a risk, a sannyasi in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may accept even a person who is not thoroughly fit to become a disciple. Later on, by the mercy of such a bona fide spiritual master, the disciple is gradually elevated. However, if one increases the number of disciples simply for some prestige or false honor, he will surely fall down in the matter of executing Krishna consciousness. So, I don't see how much false prestige it gives you. It's like it gives you a headache. Similarly, I mean, what are you going to do? Brag to someone? I got so many. No, I got so many. I got more than you. You know. But I guess in India it's like that. Similarly, a bona fide spiritual master has no business reading many books simply to show his proficiency or to get popularity by lecturing in different places. One should avoid all these things. It is also stated that sannyasi should not be enthusiastic about constructing temples. We can see in the lives of the various acharyas in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that they are not very enthusiastic about constructing temples. However, if somebody comes forward to offer some service, the same reluctant acharyas will encourage the building of costly temples by such servitors. For example, Rupa Goswami was offered a favor by Maharaj Man Singh, the commander-in-chief of Emperor Akbar, and Rupa Goswami instructed him to construct a large temple for Govindaji, which cost vast amounts of money. And of course, there's the example of Sanatana Goswami, that Sanatana Goswami was worshipping Madan Mohan, and Madan Mohan was just hanging from the tree in a little sack. And Madan Mohan said, I want some salt with these dried bread balls. And Sanatana Goswami said, I don't have time, I'm doing too many other things. If you want salt, you got to get it for yourself. Because not with that, but he said you have to get it for yourself. And so Madan Mohan made an arrangement. There was a salt barge, and the Yamuna was stuck, and the owner came up and went to Sanatana Goswami and said, Swamiji, can we do anything? Who was sitting on Dwadasadicha Hill, which overlooks the Yamuna. And then Sanatana Goswami said, just talk to Madan Mohan about it. And he prayed to Madan Mohan, and then there was a storm, and then the salt barge was lifted and proceeded to sell all the salt, and therefore the temple of Madan Mohan was constructed with that money. So, in other words, Sanatana Goswami was not enthusiastic about constructing a temple, but Krishna made the arrangement himself. So a bona fide spiritual master should not personally take any responsibility for constructing temples, but Prabhupada did. He took a responsibility, but you see in the readings that we've been doing that Prabhupada was very much in anxiety about the Bombay temple. But that's for preaching, not just for constructing. He's enthusiastic for preaching, not for constructing. But if someone has money and wants to spend it in the service of Krishna, and Acharya like Rupa Goswami may utilize the devotee's money to construct a nice, costly temple for the service of the Lord. Unfortunately, it happens that someone who is not fit to become a spiritual master may approach wealthy persons to contribute for temple constructions. If such money is utilized by unqualified spiritual masters for living comfortably in costly temples without actually doing any preaching work, this is not acceptable. In other words, a spiritual master needn't be very enthusiastic for constructing the temple building simply in the name of so-called spiritual advancement. Rather, his first and foremost activity should be to preach. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj recommended that a spiritual master print books. If one has money, instead of constructing costly temples, one should spend his money for the publication of authorized books in different languages for propagating the Krishna consciousness movement. So we'll end here, and tomorrow we'll finish up the chapter. Actually, there's only a little bit left in the chapter. Maybe we should finish it up. Straightforwardness in ordinary dealings and equilibrium in loss and gain. There's a statement in the Padma Purana, persons who are engaged in Krishna consciousness should never be disturbed by some material gain or loss. Even if there's some material loss, one should not be perturbed, but should always think of Krishna within himself. The purport is that every conditioned soul is always absorbed in thinking of materialistic activities. He has to free himself from such thoughts and transfer himself completely to Krishna consciousness. As we have already explained, the basic principle of Krishna consciousness is to always think of Krishna. One should not be disturbed in material loss, but rather should concentrate his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord. A devotee should not be subjected to lamentation or illusion. There's the following statement in the Padma Purana: within the heart of a person who is overpowered by lamentation or anger, there is no possibility of Krishna's being manifested. Of course, we can lament that we are not Krishna conscious. We can lament that people are suffering. There's actually a spiritual type of lamentation. And we can be angry at people who are blasphemers. So, in other words, there's a type of lamentation and anger that are bona fide. And then, the demigods. One should not neglect to offer due respect to the demigods. One may not be a devotee of demigods, but that does not mean he should be disrespectful to them. For example, a Vaishnava is not a devotee of Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, but he is duty-bound to offer all respect to such highly positioned demigods. According to Vaishnava philosophy, one should offer respect even to an ant. So then, what is there? What is there to speak of such exalted persons as Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma? In the Padma Purana it is said, Krishna or Hari is the master of all demigods, and therefore he is always worshipable. But this does not mean that one should not offer respects to the demigods. And the final one is not giving pain to any living entity. This is the statement of the Mahabharata. A person who does not disturb or cause painful action in the mind of any living entity, who treats everyone just like a loving father does his children, whose heart is so pure, certainly very soon becomes favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In so-called civilized society, there is sometimes agitation against cruelty to animals, but at the same time, regular slaughterhouses are always maintained. A Vaishnava is not like that. A Vaishnava can never support animal slaughter or even give pain to any living entity. So the question is, what do you do if there's an infestation of cockroaches? What do you think? Let them enjoy. No, you should try to find some peaceful method to get rid of them. I mean, there are some methods that work sometimes, like these sound vibration devices, and maybe there's something that repels them. But sometimes in the service of Krishna, you may have to call for the exterminator. Especially if you're in a temple. I mean, nobody likes to come to a temple and find cockroaches crawling over their prasadam.
Rats, mouse.
Oh, rats. Right. Well, then you have cats. It's an easy thing. Call for the cats. Cats?
In the temple, sometimes we see little in the kitchen.
And the cats will catch them.
Yeah.
Cat, rat prasadam for the cats.
And for the cats?
And for the cats, you just train them up. Anyway, I mean, sometimes you have to use. It's sad. Prabhupada said the first thing is you should be clean. Because those rats and cockroaches that are there. I mean, cockroaches sometimes they'll even eat electronic stuff. I mean, it's really hard to get rid of them once they're there. And then, but if you're clean, there's going to be less chance. Like you put all the Boga in bottles and seal the bottles airtight. There's less chance they're going to be there. You know, but it is a problem. You know, that certainly we have to keep the temples clean and our houses clean, and we have to keep devotees free from infectious diseases that may be caused by these living entities. I mean, mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes, yeah.
I mean, even spider mites for Tulsi Maharani, spider mites.
Yeah, spider mites, and then you have, well, mosquitoes in Mayapur, they spray for mosquitoes. Because otherwise, devotees would be dying all over the place from malaria and Zika and dengue.
We have less mosquitoes now in Mayapur.
Yeah, because they've been spraying.
Spring.
I mean, like in Fiji, you got this dengue,
Dengue, yes.
and people die all the time. So, I mean, sometimes you have to give pain to living entities. I mean, even when you're plowing a field, what are you doing? You're cutting the worms up.
True.
So, unnecessary pain. I would just say that unnecessary pain. We should minimize it. When you start your car, you're cremating so many microscopic creatures, bugs and things like that, because it's sucked into the intake of the car. So minimize it. Okay. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Here it says like building a temple like from devotees' money. So, devotees money?
Where? Second. Building a temple is about sannyasis, not be enthusiastic to build a temple. Or what? What page is it on?
They started giving up company of non-devotees.
Yeah.
In the one.
It says,
Fourth
so
paragraph.
bona fide spiritual master should not personally take any responsibility for constructing temples.
Fourth
But
paragraph.
if someone has money and wants to spend it in the service of Krishna, an acharya like Rupa Goswami may
Yeah.
utilize the devotees'
Yeah.
money.
But, Prabhupada, on the other hand, we found Prabhupada took responsibility for building temples. For
For higher
preaching,
purpose.
for a higher
Yeah.
Higher
purpose.
purpose.
So
Yeah.
those are details.
Yeah.
So here we were talking about details and principles.
Yeah.
So these are details we're talking about. So details can be adjusted according to time, places, and circumstance if there's a higher principle. So there's a higher principle there.
Guru Maharaj,
Yeah.
if a non-devotee likes to give charity to the temple in terms
That's
of
fine.
construction,
Sure.
does he get any benefit?
Yeah, of
from
course. You get a tremendous amount of benefit.
Total source.
Yeah, I mean, he gets devotional service. He'll become fortunate. There's this, because many times when the temples want to collect money, they have this whole statement that if one gives to Vishnu, one gets, how many times?
10 times more.
10,000. They give it. I mean, it's really interesting how devotees collect money. Anyway, like if one gives to an ordinary Brahmin, one gets just the same thing in response. If one
Yeah.
gives to a Vaishnava, one gets 1,000,000 times the response. One gives to build a temple, and so everyone goes, "Wow, I'm going to get 1,000,000 times back what I give to the temple." Hari bol. And so they give $20 and
Yeah, and extra 20,000.
20 million. It's interesting how devotees sometimes collect money from people. These brochures, or gets to go back to Godhead or something. You can't buy your way back to Godhead. It's not that you simply, there are injunctions, you build a temple, you go back to Godhead, but you have to love Krishna and follow Bhakti Yoga and everything like that. You can buy your way. If you could buy your way back to Godhead, I'd go to business right now. Would have joined my father and, just made a lot of money and bought my way back to Godhead instead of having to take the trouble of getting up early every morning. You can't buy your way back to Godhead. But it is devotional service. And one gets sukriti from doing that. And, if you really want, like, wealth in response, Krishna will give it to you. He'll become wealthy. So, it's good. Give to Krishna, and you'll get back. So, any other questions or comments?
One
Yes.
more question.
Yeah.
When we do Abhishek at the temple, there's a lot of milk and ghee and all those things
Yeah.
are used. In India, when I was in India, most of the discussions that among my friends, it's usually like that. Why so much of milk and ghee is used when we see that outside people are starving. So I really don't know how to answer this.
So give them the abhishek to drink after they offer it to the deities.
Prashadam.
Yeah, give them prasadam.
But
And they're bathing the deities with milk and ghee, so give them some glasses and that'll help them. Give it to them. No, we worship Krishna. I mean, why offer Krishna so many opulent things, Well, why dress the deities so nicely when some people don't have sufficient clothes to wear? People, first of all, in India not many people are starving. That's a Western concept that people are starving in India. I mean, recently I haven't seen so many people starving in India. And secondly, if people are starving or suffering, I mean, this appears to be heartless, that's due to some reason. Either karmically or Krishna's put them in that circumstance for a particular reason. And we want to give them prasadam, yeah. Part of our program is to distribute prasadam widely. Prabhupada was crying when he saw the the children fighting with the animals over the prasadam remnants in Mayapur. And he said anyone within like 10-mile radius should be given prasadam. No one should go hungry. So we wanted to distribute prasadam. But by offering sacrifice to Vishnu, one gets more ability to distribute prasadam too. You know, Vishnu empowers one, Krishna empowers one to do that. Plus, it's not wasted. I mean, people should drink the Abhishek water, and not water, but you know, the milk and ghee and everything like that. They shouldn't throw it away. Let them distribute it. Because sometimes they have that Maha Abhishek in Mayapur, and I'm sure there's so much people can't drink it. Oh. So, you know, I think there should be an idea not to overdo it. I think if you're overdoing it and it's pouring all over the place, and you have to throw like 90% of it away, I don't think it's appropriate. That may be politically incorrect, that statement, in Mayapur. But I think you should do the proper quantity. You don't have to. I mean, I think it's just too much when they use so much and it's all over the altar and all over everywhere, and obviously they can't give it to people. It's too much. Let them do it simpler. And plus, Abhishek, the whole idea, the fruit juice thing is not part of the traditional Abhishek. That's something this concoction was added later by ISKCON. You have different colored fruit juices.
Yeah.
Abhishek is Panchamrita.
Panchamrita. Yeah.
Yes.
That's Abhishek,
That's right.
not banana juice and avocado juice, kiwi fruit juice, you know. Where's that stated in the Shastras?
That's right.
It's not. It's
only
Panchamrita.
Panchamrita.
That, you know, ghee, milk, you know, like that. You know, people make up all these things, you know, these fancy things. I mean, why do things so complicated? Like in Mayapur, that you have all these Gurukul boys wearing rabbit hats, you know, it has nothing to do with. You see the little That's not even our sampradaya, you know, it's just something. I guess if it's so fancy it attracts people, people think we're actually sophisticated. Maybe it's good for preaching. But I don't think so much ghee should be used and so much milk. Because it comes at great expense. I think they should, you know, small amount.
How did we start?
How did what?
How did we start?
I don't know. I didn't do it. Don't blame me, you know. I'll take the blame for anything that I do.
I was in Fiji.
Yeah,
Guru Maharaj came, Ramakrishna Maharaj, I was doing Abhishek with the Panchamrita.
yeah.
Then he told me you can make green juice, coconut juice, and all the...
It started in ISKCON some time ago.
I don't know how he started, but he told me like this.
Yeah, cane juice. I guess cane juice is easy. But they have all these different fruits and everything like that.
Yeah.
You know.
Maybe just to make more attractive.
Yeah, I mean for preaching, but
Or if somebody does it out of pure love, you know, as an offering.
I guess out of love, you know. I can't
Pretty much offering.
I shouldn't criticize out of love. But it's not in the Shastras.
No.
Shastras are just Panchamrita.
Yeah, non-devotees, they use Panchamrita.
Yeah. That's what I would do. I mean, I wouldn't get into all this fancy stuff. It's just, we just eat the fruits. Anyway, boy, I'm so politically incorrect. Anyway, so I guess that's it. We'll see everybody later as we do our deity worship.